Detective Morgan, the relentless investigator, and Alex Turner, a young gang member turned informant, are about to uncover the chilling world of London's gangs who crash cars for cash, a hidden empire where every collision is planned, every payout is calculated, and no one is safe. London's streets appear calm at first glance. Families stroll along sidewalks, children play near parked cars, and the usual hum of city life fills the air. People go about their routines, oblivious to the hidden danger lurking just beneath the surface. It is a city of contrasts, a place where gleaming high-rises and historic streets coexist, yet a secret criminal underworld thrives in the shadows. Among the most insidious operations are gangs who make money by deliberately crashing cars for cash, an underground scheme that has quietly flourished for years. On the surface, these accidents seem ordinary, just another mishap in London's bustling traffic. But closer scrutiny reveals a disturbing pattern. Drivers often escape unharmed, sometimes barely shaken, while vehicles are left battered beyond recognition. Insurance payouts are swiftly processed, and the criminals move on to the next target without drawing attention. The phenomenon is not random. The gangs have studied the city meticulously. They know the quiet streets where accidents are unlikely to attract police attention, intersections with blind spots where cameras rarely capture details, and neighborhoods where high-value vehicles are parked. They strike in broad daylight and at night, using the unpredictability of traffic to their advantage. Each crash is carefully orchestrated, with roles assigned to every participant. Some members act as drivers, executing the staged collision with precision. Others pose as bystanders or first responders, adding credibility to the incident. Collectors are on standby, ready to ensure that insurance payouts and cash are quickly secured. Even minor details are considered. Skid marks are placed in specific positions, minor scratches are fabricated, and the timing of the crash is planned to coincide with peak traffic flow, so the incident appears genuine. Authorities began to notice the pattern after receiving a series of unusual reports. Insurance companies flagged claims that seemed suspiciously convenient, while accident investigators noticed inconsistencies that defied explanation. The vehicles were heavily damaged, yet the drivers and passengers appeared almost untouched. In some cases, multiple accidents involved the same vehicles or individuals, raising eyebrows among investigators. Yet despite these clues, tracing the operation proved difficult. The gangs operated in small, compartmentalized cells, ensuring that no single member held too much information. Communication was conducted through encrypted messages, burner phones, and coded language, making it nearly impossible for law enforcement to intercept plans. Every move was calculated to reduce exposure, yet the more successful the operation became, the more dangerous it was for those involved. The city's unsuspecting residents remained unaware. A mother crossing the street, a commuter driving to work, even a taxi driver picking up passengers, all were potential witnesses to events they would never fully understand. The gangs relied on this obliviousness, blending their crimes into the flow of daily life. And while the streets seemed ordinary, each crash left an invisible mark, a ripple that extended far beyond the initial collision. Victims struggled with insurance claims, law enforcement tried to connect the dots, and journalists began to take notice, sensing a story beneath the surface. The quiet streets of London were not as peaceful as they appeared, and what began as a few isolated incidents hinted at a far more complex and dangerous underworld, one that thrived on deception, precision, and the city's own unsuspecting rhythms. The investigation was only beginning, and the true scope of the crash-for-cash empire was still hidden in plain sight. The gangs behind the staged crashes were more organized than anyone could have imagined. They were not random groups of thrill-seekers or petty criminals. These were professionals with carefully defined roles and an almost military-like precision. Every member had a purpose, and every purpose was crucial to the success of the operation. Some were drivers, trained to execute collisions with frightening accuracy. They could hit a vehicle at the perfect angle, causing significant damage while ensuring the occupants remained unharmed. Others acted as lookouts, scanning the streets for police, witnesses, or unexpected traffic. These individuals had an uncanny ability to disappear from sight, blending seamlessly with the city's everyday crowd, yet always knowing where to be at the right moment. Coordinators, often working from distant locations, monitored the operation through cameras, GPS trackers, and encrypted communications, giving real-time instructions to those on the ground. Then there were the collectors, the ones responsible for gathering cash or insurance claim details, moving quickly and quietly, so the operation could continue without leaving a trace. The gang's knowledge of the city was remarkable. They knew which streets were less monitored by traffic cameras, which neighborhoods were slow to report accidents, and which drivers were likely to have high-value vehicles insured for maximum payouts. Some even had insider information from car dealerships or insurance offices, giving them an edge in selecting targets. Their planning extended beyond individual crashes. Entire routes were mapped out, backup vehicles were positioned nearby, and contingency plans were ready for almost any scenario. If a crash attracted unwanted attention, a secondary driver could block off an escape route or create a diversion. Every action was designed to minimize risk and maximize profit. Despite their meticulous planning, the gangs were not invincible. The more people involved, the higher the risk of mistakes or betrayal. Trust was fragile, and paranoia ran deep. Some members were replaced quickly if they showed signs of hesitation or incompetence. Rumors of police informants circulated constantly, keeping everyone on edge. Yet, for all the risks, the operation remained highly profitable, with cash flowing in from multiple sources: insurance claims, fraudulent repair invoices, and even intimidation of local mechanics who assisted with the staged damages. For the gang leaders, money was power. It bought influence, protection, and a sense of untouchable status. For lower-level members, it was a dangerous ticket out of poverty, though one that came with constant threats of violence or arrest. The operation was almost invisible to the public. Ordinary Londoners passed by these crashes daily, unaware of the calculated chaos unfolding in front of them. A taxi driver might witness a fender bender and assume it was a simple accident. A passerby could see a group of men inspecting a smashed car and think they were concerned neighbors. Every staged crash was designed to blend into the natural rhythm of city life, leaving only subtle clues for those trained to notice irregularities. Even local authorities struggled to piece together the fragmented incidents, as the gangs left no direct evidence behind. Yet, cracks were beginning to form in their seemingly flawless operation. A pattern was emerging in the accidents, small enough to be overlooked by most but glaring to investigators and insurance specialists. Hidden in the chaos of London's traffic, these gangs thrived in the shadows. But the first signs of vulnerability hinted that their empire, built on deception and precision, might not be as untouchable as they believed. The streets that once offered anonymity were starting to reveal their secrets, and the intricate web of roles and operations could soon unravel under the right scrutiny. Detective Morgan had been tracking the gang for months, slowly piecing together a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. Every staged crash left behind only subtle clues, but over time, a pattern began to emerge. The gang's operations were too consistent to be coincidental, their planning too precise to be random accidents. Morgan and his team studied surveillance footage, insurance claims, and police reports, slowly identifying the network of drivers, lookouts, and coordinators. Each member appeared ordinary, blending seamlessly into London's daily life, but their actions were anything but innocent. The first real opportunity to catch them came when a tip from an insurance investigator led to a single unusual case: a luxury sedan that had been involved in multiple minor collisions within a span of weeks, each accident suspiciously resulting in a large insurance payout. The team prepared meticulously, planning every step of the undercover operation. Surveillance teams positioned themselves near the suspected crash sites, monitoring traffic patterns and timing. Unmarked cars were stationed nearby, capturing every detail on camera. Detectives studied the habits of the gang members, noting the times they appeared on the streets, the vehicles they drove, and even the way they communicated. They quickly realized that the gang was exceptionally disciplined. Every crash was orchestrated down to the second, and every participant knew their role. If even one person hesitated, the operation could fail. The risk was high, but so was the reward. A chance to finally expose a sophisticated criminal network thriving on London's unsuspecting roads. The first opportunity arrived late one evening. A target vehicle, a high-end SUV, drove through a quiet neighborhood, the perfect setting for a staged accident. From nearby rooftops and hidden alleys, the police watched as a group of men in dark vehicles began to follow it. The tension was palpable. Every movement was precise, calculated. Then, almost like clockwork, the crash occurred. One of the gang's drivers rammed the SUV at an exact angle, leaving significant damage to the rear bumper while ensuring the occupants inside were unharmed. Another member quickly stepped in, pretending to be a shocked witness. The staged chaos looked real to anyone observing from a distance. Yet Detective Morgan's team had the entire sequence recorded, capturing the gang's meticulous coordination in high detail. The aftermath was just as revealing. The gang calmly inspected the wreckage, taking photos and exchanging information with the supposed victims. Their casual demeanor was a stark contrast to the destruction around them. But Morgan knew every subtle gesture told a story of practiced routine. For the first time, the investigators could see the system in action, the perfect execution of a crime that had remained hidden for so long. Yet even during this success, danger loomed. One gang member, unusually alert, seemed to notice the surveillance. Morgan's heart raced as he watched the man glance toward a hidden camera, suspicion flickering in his eyes. A single misstep could compromise the entire operation, and the detectives realized that even with months of preparation, the element of uncertainty remained. The sting ended successfully, but it left a lingering sense of unease. The gang's operation was vast and handily coordinated, yet the first cracks in their armor had appeared. Detective Morgan knew that this was only the beginning. The evidence collected from this single-staged crash would provide the foundation for a deeper investigation, one that could expose the full scope of the crash-for-cash empire. The streets of London, once calm and ordinary, had become a battlefield, with every vehicle a potential pawn in a dangerous game, and the hunt for the gang had only just begun. As the investigation progressed, the police began to uncover the full complexity of the gang's operation. It was not merely a loose network of criminals. It was a tightly knit organization with layers of hierarchy and hidden alliances. Each member had a specific role, and breaking the chain of command proved nearly impossible. Investigators discovered that some of the drivers were experienced professionals with past records in theft, fraud, and even violent crime, while others were young men drawn from local neighborhoods, lured by the promise of fast money and an easy escape from poverty. These younger recruits were often unaware of the full extent of the criminal enterprise, believing they were only taking part in simple accidents. They were expendable, easily replaced, and always under the watchful eyes of higher-up. The more the police learned, the more dangerous the gang appeared. Staged crashes were only one piece of the puzzle. Some accidents were designed not just for insurance fraud, but to send messages to rival gangs or enforce dominance over certain neighborhoods. Vehicles were deliberately targeted multiple times, and sometimes minor damage was inflicted on specific cars to intimidate owners or competitors. The gang's influence extended into repair shops, where mechanics were coerced into submitting inflated invoices, and even into insurance offices, where inside contacts ensured claims were approved without scrutiny. The deeper investigators dug, the more they realized that this was not simply about money, it was about control. Trust within the gang was fragile, and paranoia ran deep. Internal surveillance was common. Leaders monitored their members constantly to prevent leaks. Any hesitation or mistake could result in punishment, ranging from beatings to threats against family members. The police discovered evidence of internal betrayals, members secretly cooperating with rival groups or taking money for themselves. These betrayals often led to violent confrontations, sometimes staged as accidents to maintain the gang's cover. Yet despite the constant tension, the organization functioned with remarkable efficiency, moving from one staged crash to another, collecting millions in insurance payouts and other illicit earnings. The investigation also revealed that the gang maintained strict secrecy. Communication was conducted exclusively through encrypted messaging apps and burner phones, leaving no paper trail. Meetings were held in abandoned buildings, remote warehouses, or parked cars in deserted areas, always under the cover of darkness or during times when few people were on the streets. Even those on the lower rungs of the hierarchy were often unaware of the identities of the gang's leaders, a measure that protected the organization from infiltration but also fueled suspicion and fear among its own members. As journalists began to catch wind of the story, the gang's calculated precision was met with growing public concern. Reports of unusual accidents and insurance anomalies made headlines, and people started questioning whether the streets were truly safe. Yet for the gang, exposure only increased the stakes. Each crash, each payout, and each internal conflict added to the complexity of their web. Investigators knew that capturing the leaders would require more than simple surveillance. It would require infiltrating the gang itself, convincing someone to risk everything by turning informant. The stakes were high, and the danger was real. London's quiet streets were no longer just ordinary pathways for daily life. They had become the silent stage for a ruthless criminal empire, where betrayal, deception, and calculated violence dictated every move. The investigation reached a critical turning point when an unexpected source emerged from within the gang. One of the lower-level members, a man who had spent months carrying out staged crashes, became disillusioned with the operation. The constant pressure, the violence, and the looming threat of imprisonment or worse had begun to weigh heavily on him. He feared for his life and for the lives of those around him, realizing that the gang's ruthless leaders would not hesitate to dispose of anyone who seemed expendable. Driven by desperation and a flicker of conscience, he decided to secretly record the gang's discussions, taking detailed notes of their plans, targets, and financial transactions. Every message, every call, and every meeting became potential evidence that could finally expose the full scale of the crash-for-cash operation. The informant's recordings were detailed and damning. They revealed a level of sophistication that stunned investigators. The gang's members were not just committing insurance fraud. They were manipulating entire networks of businesses, including auto repair shops and insurance offices, to ensure that their staged crashes produced maximum profit. Some members had been assigned to monitor the flow of money, while others coordinated crashes to eliminate rival gangs under the guise of accidents. The recordings painted a chilling picture of how ordinary streets in London had become the stage for a cold, calculated criminal enterprise. But before the informant could deliver the full files to the authorities, he vanished. Days of waiting turned into weeks, and investigators feared the worst, that he had been discovered by the gang and silenced. The loss was devastating. Without the evidence, the operation seemed poised to continue unchecked, and the gang's activities could have remained hidden for years. Detectives combed through every lead, retracing the informant's last known movements. But there was no trace of him. The investigation seemed to stall, and frustration grew among the team as they feared that months of careful work had been wasted. Then, in a surprising twist, a piece of evidence appeared almost by accident. A CCTV camera in a distant neighborhood, initially thought unrelated to the case, captured a glimpse of a car parked in an alleyway. Investigators examined the footage closely and noticed a small object left in the vehicle's glove compartment. Upon further inspection, it was the missing recordings, carefully concealed and forgotten by the informant in his haste to avoid detection. This discovery reignited the investigation and provided a breakthrough. The files contained detailed accounts of every staged crash, financial records of insurance fraud, and even coded messages showing plans to use some accidents as tools of intimidation and elimination. The revelations sent shockwaves through the police department. The staged crashes were no longer isolated incidents. They were part of a sprawling, highly organized network of crime, extending across multiple boroughs and targeting both wealthy victims and rival criminals. Every new piece of information revealed an even darker side of the gang: murders disguised as accidents, violent punishments for disloyal members, and a ruthless pursuit of power that overshadowed any concern for human life. The discovery of the informant's hidden evidence marked a turning point. For the first time, authorities had the proof to dismantle the operation from the inside, exposing a criminal empire that had thrived in the shadows of London's streets for years. Following the discovery of the informant's recordings, investigators were able to trace the gang's financial empire in startling detail. The scale of their operations was far beyond anything they had anticipated. The staged crashes were just the beginning. The real profit came from an intricate web of money laundering, fraudulent insurance claims, and underground networks that spanned multiple boroughs. Every accident generated not only a direct insurance payout, but also a cascade of opportunities for additional revenue. Fake repair invoices, inflated compensation claims, and coerced payments from local mechanics created a constant flow of illicit cash. The gang had turned what seemed like petty street fraud into a highly efficient, multi-million-pound operation. The gang leaders lived in stark contrast to the lower-level members who executed the crashes. Leaders flaunted their wealth openly, buying luxury cars, designer clothes, and apartments in upscale neighborhoods. They were meticulous in maintaining appearances of legitimate success, often visiting high-end restaurants or attending social events, all while orchestrating crashes in the shadows. Meanwhile, drivers and collectors, the foot soldiers of the operation, lived under constant pressure and threat. Their rewards were far smaller, and mistakes were punished severely. Even minor errors could result in physical intimidation or immediate removal from the gang, demonstrating the brutal hierarchy that maintained control and ensured loyalty through fear. Investigators discovered that the gang also used complex systems to obscure the flow of money. Shell companies were created to process fraudulent insurance claims, and cash transactions were often disguised as legitimate business expenses. Laundering extended into car dealerships, garages, and even private lenders who were unaware of the illicit source of funds. Some gang members were skilled accountants or former finance professionals, capable of disguising criminal proceeds within legal framework. The system was designed so efficiently that even seasoned investigators initially struggled to trace the true origins of the money. Each layer of laundering added distance between the crime and the criminals, making the empire appear untouchable. Despite their financial sophistication, internal tensions began to emerge. Greed and ambition created cracks in the hierarchy, as mid-level members sought a larger share of the profits. Disputes over payouts, responsibility for crashes, and loyalty fueled suspicion and fear. Leaders maintained order through intimidation, yet even they could not fully control the ambitions of those beneath them. Rival gangs also tried to encroach on their territory, sometimes staging crashes of their own to compete for payouts or to destabilize the operation. Every staged accident was now a high-stakes maneuver, balancing profit with personal safety, loyalty, and dominance. The investigators also uncovered the personal toll of the operation. Many of the younger recruits had entered the gang seeking a way out of poverty, only to find themselves trapped in a cycle of crime and violence. Some were threatened, others were forced to participate in increasingly risky crashes, and all lived in fear of discovery. Their lives were a stark contrast to the lavish lifestyles of the leaders, underscoring the brutal inequality and ruthless control that defined the gang's world. By tracing the money, the police began to map the full scope of the empire, connecting crashes across boroughs and linking them to the luxurious lives of the leaders. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This was not just a criminal enterprise, it was a meticulously constructed empire, built on deception, fear, and the exploitation of both innocent victims and its own members. Every crash, every fraudulent claim, and every hidden payment was a piece of a puzzle that, once completed, revealed a chilling picture of a gang whose power extended far beyond the streets of London, into the very systems designed to protect citizens. The pressure on the gang began to mount as the police prepared for a coordinated series of raids across London. With the evidence provided by the informant, investigators knew exactly where to strike, targeting the gang's leaders, their safe houses, and key members involved in the staged crashes. The raids were planned with precision, involving multiple units, undercover officers, and surveillance teams. The stakes were high. Any mistake could tip off the gang, allowing the leaders to disappear and destroy critical evidence. For months, the operation had remained invisible to the public, but now the streets themselves seemed to pulse with anticipation, the calm of everyday life masking the storm about to break. On the day of the first raids, officers moved quickly and decisively. Key gang members were apprehended in their homes, vehicles, and offices, leaving little room for escape. Some leaders were caught completely off guard, their luxury cars still parked outside as they attempted to flee. Surveillance footage showed officers entering garages and warehouses, uncovering stacks of forged documents, falsified insurance claims, and even lists detailing scheduled staged crashes. The raids were methodical, leaving no stone unturned. Each arrest sent a ripple of fear through the criminal network, disrupting operations and forcing lower-level members into panic. The gang, once confident in its invulnerability, began to unravel from within. With leaders in custody and communicants intercepted, mistrust and paranoia spread rapidly. Lower-level members suspected betrayal among their own ranks, wondering who had informed the police or leaked information. Internal conflicts escalated, with some members attempting to hide evidence or destroy incriminating files, while others tried to flee the city entirely. Rival gangs took advantage of the chaos, escalating street-level violence as they tried to claim territory and profits left exposed by the sudden disruption of the crash-for-cash empire. Even as arrests mounted, a few of the gang's highest-ranking leaders managed to evade capture. They vanished into safe houses, using underground networks to avoid detection. Their disappearance left investigators frustrated, but also confirmed the organization's sophistication. The remaining members were left to fend for themselves, and without the structure imposed by their leaders, mistakes became inevitable. Staged crashes were botched, payouts were mismanaged, and members exposed themselves to further scrutiny by police. Each misstep accelerated the collapse of the once tightly controlled operation, highlighting just how dependent the gang had been on the leadership at the top. The fall of the gang did not end with arrests alone. Court proceedings, public exposure, and media scrutiny intensified the pressure. Journalists detailed the gang's operations, revealing the staggering scale of staged crashes, insurance fraud, and hidden violence. Victims came forward to share their experiences, further unraveling the carefully constructed facade of normality. The streets, once a stage for the gang's crimes, became evidence in a growing story of greed, manipulation, and control. By the time the final raids were conducted, the gang's empire had been effectively dismantled. Internal chaos, captured evidence, and the strategic arrests of key figures had crippled the organization. Yet even in defeat, the operation left a lingering sense of danger. Some leaders remained at large, rival factions threatened to fill the void, and the lessons learned from the empire of staged crashes suggested that new criminal networks could emerge. The fall of the gang marked the end of one chapter. But the streets of London remained a battleground, a constant reminder that organized crime, while weakened, could never be fully eliminated. The aftermath of the police raids and arrests revealed the full extent of the crash-for-cash empire and its impact on London streets. Court proceedings brought the gang's activities into the public eye, exposing a network that had thrived in the shadows for years. The trials were extensive, lasting months, as prosecutors presented evidence of staged crashes, fraudulent insurance claims, and the intimidation of both victims and insiders. Each piece of evidence, from recordings to financial records, painted a detailed picture of a highly organized criminal operation that extended far beyond what anyone had imagined. The public learned that what had seemed like ordinary traffic accidents were often carefully orchestrated crimes designed to extract maximum profit while minimizing risk to the perpetrators. Several gang members received long prison sentences, with the leaders facing decades behind bars for their roles in the operation. The court documents revealed shocking details of violence within the gang, including punishments for members who made mistakes, threats against those who considered turning informant, and even crashes staged to intimidate rivals or silence dissent. The sentences sent a clear message: organized crime would face severe consequences, and no one, not even the most skilled and disciplined criminals, was untouchable. Insurance companies, working alongside law enforcement, began implementing stricter fraud detection systems and reviewing claims more carefully, reducing the likelihood that such an extensive scheme could be repeated so easily in the future. Yet, despite the high-profile arrests and convictions, the story did not end with a sense of complete resolution. Some of the gang's top leaders had managed to evade capture, disappearing into safe houses or leaving the country entirely. Their absence left unanswered questions about how much of the empire remained intact and whether they might attempt to rebuild their network from a distance. Additionally, lower-level members, now freed from the leadership but still connected by fear and loyalty, faced an uncertain future. Some chose to cooperate with authorities in exchange for reduced sentences, while others vanished into the city's underworld, potentially seeking new opportunities in crime. The victims of the staged crashes continued to deal with the aftermath of the gang's actions. Beyond financial losses and insurance complications, many experienced trauma from the accidents themselves. Ordinary Londoners, who had unknowingly become part of the gang's schemes, were left with the unsettling realization that danger had lurked in places they had always considered safe. The revelations prompted wider discussions about urban safety, insurance practices, and the vulnerability of seemingly mundane aspects of daily life, such as driving through quiet neighborhoods or trusting strangers at the scene of an accident. Even with the gang dismantled, London streets remained vulnerable. The lessons learned from the operation showed that organized crime could adapt and evolve. New groups could emerge, taking advantage of gaps in oversight or exploiting the same methods of deception. Authorities remained vigilant, using the evidence gathered during the investigation to train officers, improve detection methods, and monitor suspicious activity more closely. The story of the Crash for Cash gang became both a warning and a lesson, demonstrating the lengths to which criminals would go to manipulate a city's systems for profit and power. The streets of London, though safer in the immediate aftermath, continued to hide shadows of potential danger, a reminder that even after one empire falls, the battle against organized crime is never truly over.